How are you feeling? You got John Riggs here. I love doing videos about retro gaming and more, so make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell icon as we celebrate the birthday of Pac-Man. I literally bought a yellow cake for $5 just so I could show off this thing in this video. I'm not gonna let it go to waste though. It's not bad. In this video, I want to show off a few variations of Pac-Man. Maybe you've seen some of them, and some of them you've probably never even heard of or seen before ever in your life. Before we do that, thanks to Numbskull's design, here is a couple of quick facts. In Japanese, Puck Puck translates as eating and munching sound. The first Pac-Man cabinet was placed at a museum facility in Tokyo. Interesting. The color yellow was chosen as its neutral and deemed a peaceful color. Enough of that, let's check out some versions of Pac-Man. So here you have the game that started it all. This is Pac-Man. This is default Pac-Man. This is arcade Pac-Man. This is the game that took the world by storm. There were t-shirts, there were Ben Cooper designed Halloween costumes, you know, with the plastic mask and the rubber band. There was a hit song. I mean, there's been so many more things along the way, so influential for the past 40 years. My goodness. Did anyone ever question what these dots were that he was eating? I mean, they're just dots. They're just, I mean, I don't know. It's almost like those old-fashioned shoe button candy you see in those stores, you know? Well, you know about Pac-Man, but here in the arcade is Pac-Man Plus. Now this game, pretty much the same game, but it appeals maybe to a newer audience. I'm not exactly sure. That's kind of the way I got it. Was here's Pac-Man, and maybe the ghosts look a little bit different, especially in the eyes. But when you eat your power pellet, the ghosts get this little flag on top of their head, and then like instead of cherries, it's like a can of Coke. Well, bootleg Coke, I guess. I mean, it could have been cherry Coke now that I think about it, but you know. So they made a Pac-Man Plus. It's like, you've already played Pac-Man, here's the re-image, here's the remap. And this is not a hack or anything. This was in the arcades and everything. You know, for the longest time, my favorite version was Super Pac-Man. It ditched the dots to just eat the fruit, but you could get the Super Power Pellet, so you could eat through, like, the walls and, you know, go through the ghost. You don't eat the ghost, you just kind of go through them. The ghost turned like this weird kind of, like, oblong shape. I thought that was kind of fun. And this also kind of started the, you eat the keys to unlock the doors, and then the doors would open up, and then you could eat the fruit inside or eat the Power Pellets. You know, those do the same thing, too. Super Pac-Man was a lot of fun, for sure. That was one of my favorites. And then the next year we had Pac and Pal. It's a little mixture of both, maybe even a little bit more Super Pac-Man, but this one you have like a helper who helps you get you the items. But you have these cards that open the doors and everything on this one. So yeah, you eat the cards, which is weird enough. Curious to see in this game that there is no warp zone, or there is no bridge, you know, warp hole, whatever those things were called on the side. There is that weird thing in the middle, but you're not immune to it. Like a ghost come in there, then it's gonna hit you and you're gonna die anyway, so I have no idea, but yeah, whatever. Pac and Pal was fun to see in some arcades. Then we move on to the platformers. The very next year we get Pac-Land, and this one's definitely based on the cartoon. I mean, it has the cartoon song in there and everything. Now, in the arcade version of Pac-Land, it was kind of weird. You had your buttons. You had one button that moves you one way, one button that moves you the other way, and then you have your jump. And the more you hit the button, the faster you go. And it features the ghosts from the cartoon in this one. You can actually jump on their heads, but if you jump into them, you will die. But you get these power pellets, which will, again, make it so you can eat the ghosts, and you just move on to the next stage. There's multiple stages in this game, and I just thought it was kind of a fun, you know, little breath of fresh air for a Pac-Man game. And then bringing it back to the old school with a new twist, you have Pac-Mania, and this is kind of your weird 3D, isometric-ish kind of Pac-Man game. It had a couple of different maps, couple of different levels you could choose from. I'm doing the classic map here, but like there was one where that was on Lego. That was kind of fun. More than 4 ghosts in this one, and they can all gang on you, but you do have a jump button, and the jump button is going to save your hind many a time. And you maybe even played Pac-Mania. There was a port on the NES. Speaking of ports, we can go through some of those, starting off with the Atari 2600 version. Man, this was the one that everyone played. This is the one that was buried in New Mexico. This is the one that we all suffered through. Me personally, back in the day, I still enjoyed playing this. I knew it wasn't arcade Pac-Man, but it was still Pac-Man enough for me. Same premise, same idea. You eat the dots, or wafers, I guess, in this one. I mean, this is the only map you ever see. I mean, the ghosts just get faster and faster as far as the difficulty goes, but I still had a lot of fun with this one. I didn't hate it. Got the NES version of Pac-Man, and they made a couple of them. There is the Namco release, and there is the Tengen release, and both of them were really just the same game. So whatever one you were playing on, you're gonna be fine. They made Pac-Man for the Game Boy. And this is interesting because it was kind of zoomed in on the map, and then the map would scroll with you depending on where you were. But, I mean, it still played all right. If you like Pac-Man, it was a good Pac-Man on the go kind of idea. Kind of the same idea for Pac-Man on the Game Gear, but this one's in color. Fancy, fancy. Now, Namco made a Pac-Man collection for the Game Boy Advance. And this one has a lot of different versions of Pac-Man on it, including a pretty cool looking, I thought it was pretty neat. Their arcade version of Pac-Man showed the whole screen, and I thought it played pretty decently, for a Pac-Man game. It's almost like you get those Pac-Man collections to play the other versions and not really play classic Pac-Man, but I thought it worked out alright. They made a Pac-Man pinball for the Game Boy Advance. I thought this was cool because I love video pinball. 2 maps on this one, and it's pinball, but you're knocking around Pac-Man. Love the Dig Dug reference in there. They had Pac-Land in the arcade, and they also ported Pac-Land to the TurboGrafx 16, and this was one of the TurboGrafx 16 games I had back during my height of TurboGrafx 16 fandom when I was in middle school, of all places. And it's a very decent port. I'm a huge fan of this game. Still like playing it today. They made this on several systems, but they had Pac-Attack. This was kind of their version of, I don't want to give it a Tetris reference, but it was their version of a puzzle game that happened to feature Pac-Man, where you do clear out the lines like Tetris, but with these ghosts that keep on getting in your way, every once in a while you'll drop a Pac-Man. And then the Pac-Man will, move around and eat the ghosts that are in its path to help you clear out those ghosts so you can put bricks there to clear out the lines. And I thought this was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun playing this one. Again, this is available on a lot of different systems, so whatever systems you have, there's probably a version of it, or there's a collection available that has this version of it, if you know what I mean. And somewhere along the way in the late 90s, early 2000s, Pac-Man had kind of a resurgence, but of all these other kind of weirder style games, here's Pac-Man World. Now this one is on the Game Boy Advance. That's the version I've been playing. There is a Pac-Man World for like the PlayStation 1. I didn't have that one. But this is a kind of a 3D platformer. It's interesting enough. You can move around and everything, and you can actually bop on top of enemies' heads, and you can kind of do a little spin attack, much like Sonic the Hedgehog. It was cool to see Pac-Man like this. Now again, there's a PlayStation 1 version. That one actually probably admittedly plays better, but this is the footage from the Game Boy Advance version. And they also made a Pac-Man World 2, kind of the same idea, maybe more dots, but just, more of the same. You move and you run and you jump, and it's Pac-Man. You gotta have that kind of cartoony looking Pac-Man. They made a game called Pac in Time, and this is a unique looking Pac-Man. How Pac-Man looks in this game is pretty unique, and I love it. I'm all for it. I wish this was how the cartoony Pac-Man looked in all the games. He just looks so big and round and cute and fluffy, and I don't know, man. This one actually has you getting items to progress through the level. So you can throw fireballs, and you can use a hammer and blow bubbles and stuff like that. Well, this is a fun platformer resurgence of, a game starring Pac-Man. After all those alterations along the way, they finally come out with a game called Pac-Man 2. Is this the true sequel? I don't know, man. I don't really consider it a sequel, but it is a fun game featuring Pac-Man. Now, I have the one for the Super Nintendo. It's available on Genesis as well, and probably something else. And it's a game where it plays more like a point-and-click game, where Pac-Man just goes, but then you have to direct its attention on, look up on the ground, look down, look this way, to walk this way. Each round has an objective that you have to accomplish somehow by some means, and your ability is you're the slingshot that can hit the items out of the way or do what you need to do to make sure that Pac-Man gets through the level and makes it out makes it out in one piece. And those are just a few different versions of Pac-Man. I wanted to keep it retro, at least on this channel. But even on the Nintendo Switch, which I absolutely love, they have this Namco Museum arcade pack that happens to feature Pac-Man Versus. There's the Pac-Man Championship Edition 2, and other games on here too. So if you're just looking for Pac-Man on the Switch, this is probably the way to go because it has classic Pac-Man and then all these other versions of Pac-Man too. But man, doing it big for 40 years. Can you believe it? My goodness gracious. Thank you for watching. I'm going to finish this cake. Not the whole thing. I'm going to finish my slice of cake. And I will thank you, and I'll see you very, very soon. Always doing videos all the time. Make sure you're subscribed, bell icon notifications so you don't miss out, because there's too many videos coming out all the time on this channel.